meeting is being recorded.
Okay, great. Thank you, Leah. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the July 8th, 2021 Planning Commission. This is a special meeting and is being conducted utilizing teleconferencing and electronic means consistent with State of California Executive Order number 29-20 dated March 17th, 2020. We are conducting the meeting using the Zoom platform and streaming it live on the city website and broadcasting on Comcast Channel 15 as well as via the city YouTube channel. Public members had the opportunity to submit emails to city staff. A report of all written comments was distributed to Planning Commission members via email and posted to the city's website under documents received after published agenda. And thank you. And Denise, can you please call a roll call?
Good evening. Commissioner Ali Sullivan.
Present.
Commissioner Bonilla absent. Commissioner Goldstein.
Here.
Commissioner Mendel.
Here.
Commissioner Okenda.
Present.
Commissioner Stevens.
Here.
Chair Roche.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Chan. I just want to go back to Al's comment. Leah, before we move on to public comments, do you want to address the roll call and that we are missing a commissioner? And do the applicants have any interest in delaying?
So it looks like we have 6 commissioners, which could result in a 3-3 tie, in which case your item wouldn't move forward. So I think I've sent an email to my applicant. I'll give them the opportunity to say if they want to postpone. And then Richard, if you've coordinated with your applicant or you want to give them the option to postpone.
Yes, I did send an email, but he is on in the meeting right now.
All right, I can move on with public comments for now, Leah, and if you get feedback, let me know before we get to the first item.
Will do.
Thank you. Okay, let's see. Let's move on to the public comment section of the meeting. Public comment section provides an opportunity to address the Planning Commission on items not listed on the agenda. The Planning Commission welcomes your comments and requests that speakers present their remarks in a respectful manner. Speakers wishing to address the Planning Commission should limit their comments to 3 minutes. And now I'll ask Denise Chan to moderate the public portion of the meeting. Denise?
Thank you, Chair. If you wish to speak and you're using the Zoom application, please click the raise hand button. If you're dialing in, press *9 to raise your hand on the phone and use *6 to unmute yourself when called to speak. If you are streaming the meeting through Zoom on your computer, but dialing in via phone, please mute yourself so that there is no feedback sound during the meeting. If there is disruptive feedback or excessive noise during the meeting, your audio will be disabled. Okay, we can give them. Does anybody wish to speak? Please click the raise hand button. Chair, at this time, nobody has raised their hand.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I'm guessing they're waiting to hear the agenda items and comment at that time. So thank you, Ms. Chan. Okay, so let us move on to our first agenda. Let me close the public comment period first. And then we will move on to our first agenda item. And so Leah, go back to you. Did you get any feedback?
My applicant wants to move forward.
Okay.
Richard, did you hear?
Yes, and he wishes to move forward also.
Okay. Great. I just realized I have to do one thing really quick. I apologize. I didn't have my agenda up in front of me because I have a million things open. So let me just do that really quick. Sorry about this. Apologize. So I can read the agenda item properly. Okay, here, let's see. Okay. So let's move on to agenda item number 1. A proposed addition of a drive-through for a proposed Starbucks coffee shop to a previously approved Mission Village retail structure at 411 Industrial Parkway, APN 078G-2651-011-02, requiring approval of conditional use permit with site plan review number 202-101-267. Doug Rich from the Valley Oak Partners and Edwin Sommer with LLC ETAL, the owner. So let us move on to a staff report on this item.
So Richard, Patnod is he's a consulting planner working with us. He's going to give the staff report, but I'm going to share my screen to show you the presentation. So let me get that up.
Great, thank you.
Leah, go ahead and go to the second slide.
Okay. Can everybody see that? Okay.
Okay, this matter before you tonight is the proposed addition of a drive-through feature to a previously approved Mission Village retail structure at the corner of Mission Boulevard and Industrial Parkway. The drive-through at this location requires approval of a conditional use permit. The Mission Village project, consisting of 72 townhomes and the subject commercial space, was approved by the Planning Commission on January 12, 2017. And you can see that project in white on the slide. The Mission Hills Golf Course is shown as green appropriately. The Mission Village project, consisting of 72 townhomes and the subject commercial space, was approved, I reported that in 2017 due to delays caused the site preparation efforts. The applicant secured approval of an extension of time by the Planning Commission on September 10, 2020. Next slide. So on this slide, you can see the Mission Village project that was approved. And I have outlined the retail building in red, which is subject to the discussion tonight. Next slide. So here you get a closer view of the original retail building that was approved. You can see it contains 8,000 square feet with the approval, and the parking that would be assigned to the commercial building surrounding it. Next slide. So the applicant proposes to modify the retail building by reducing its size from approximately 8,000 square feet to 6,313 square feet to accommodate the addition of the drive-through window and a queuing lane accommodating 12 cars. So you can see the retail building in the upper part of the slide, and the queuing lane surrounds the easterly and northerly sides of the building. You can see the car symbols there in the queuing lane. And the surrounding parking is still available for the commercial retail site. Next slide. So the drive-through window and the queuing lane are screened from the street frontages by placing them below and behind a landscape berm. So you can see that from the two streets, the drive-through feature is quite well hidden. The architectural style remains consistent with that approved with the original Mission Village project. Next slide. So a traffic operations analysis was conducted for this project. The analysis concluded that there would be no significant impacts, but made specific recommendations to improve internal circulation, which have been incorporated as conditions of approval. Two of the features include speed humps. You can see those in red on the slide, and they're at locations where there may be traffic conflicts with those in the parking fields and where the exiting and entrance of the queuing line are. So it slows down the traffic at those potential conflict points. And also there's, at the bottom part of the slide, you see drive-through overflow stalls. And those are provided so that if there's a backup within the queue line, the operators at or servers at the drive-through window can direct cars that are waiting to pick up their orders to go to the overflow parking spaces, and the orders can be delivered to those spaces to ease congestion. It is also expected that users of the drive-through will be those that are part of existing traffic flows on Mission and Industrial, and the drive-through feature is not expected to create any new traffic demand. In the audience this evening, we also have Eric from Hexagon Transportation Consultants, and he is present this evening to address any details of the traffic analysis should that be desired. Next slide. The property owners and tenants with the transportation conditions of approval will be responsible for ensuring efficient operation of the drive-through lane. Should operational deficiencies occur, the city may impose additional restrictions on the operation of the drive-through lane. Next slide. So staff recommendation is that the Planning Commission approve the conditional use permit for the drive-through retail facility based on the required findings and subject to the conditions of approval, and find that the project causes no significant impacts related to traffic and circulation, with the specific recommendations to improve internal circulation and wayfinding, which have been incorporated as proposed conditions of approval for the project. Since this report was prepared, staff has received just a few responses from the public, and those have been forwarded to you, both in support and opposition of the proposal. The applicant, Doug Rich, is also in the audience tonight, should you have any questions for the applicant. That concludes my report. I'd be happy to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Thank you for the report. Is the report from the applicant this evening, Leah? Or is the report from the applicant? A presentation, sorry, from the applicant? Doug, did you want to say something?
Yes, I would love to if that's a possibility.
Yeah, now's the time. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, appreciate it.
Thank you.
So our initial application, and a lot of you, I mean, we've been through this together here now, was back in October of 2015. It was a different world then than it is now. And really the genesis of this request with the addition of the drive-through is founded in the world we live now and the need for tenants and lenders to have a contingency plan in an environment where shelter in place and other impacts to businesses are just kind of a new reality we've got to deal with and account for. In this new world, these groups are requiring, as I said, these contingencies to deal with these interruptions. And a key feature, as you can imagine, for someone like dining is a drive-through, as it allows the business to stay open should stringent measures be enacted. But adding a drive-through here is also, I think, more than that. It's an opportunity for us to deliver on a commitment that we made to the local neighborhood and its citizens. This commitment was our intent to bring a great coffee shop to the area. It was interesting, 6 years ago when we started this project, we had a lot of neighborhood outreach, amazing neighborhood participation, as I know you know, and dialogue. And one of the constant refrains was, we need a nice place where we can gather, meet with friends, hang out, enjoy an evening. Like, bring us this place to do this. And interestingly, a coffee shop was high on the request list for the type of space that they were looking for, this kind of gathering place. But the ability to make this a reality here is right now dependent on adding this drive-through. Adding the drive-through will also, and this tenant will have the great benefits for leasing the remaining space. We're doing everything we can in building design to attract a restaurant in the remaining space, which was another request. And having a Starbucks at the site is like the anchor tenant concept and will be a strong attraction for other tenants in that adjoining space. Finally, adding the drive-through and procuring this tenant will allow the construction of the retail building to move forward now. I know staff, I think commission, council, certainly the neighbors, and really certainly, I guess to make up a term, value partners, we all want this retail portion built today. I think you've seen the property is under development there, grading's going, utilities will start shortly. And adding a drive-through will allow us to secure the tenant, which then secures the lease, which becomes the security the lender wants to provide the construction financing, which then is the final part that adds to Valley Oak's equity contributions to fund the construction of the building. So it's all kind of linked together. So this was the basis and the rationale for this request. With this, as mentioned in the staff report, we took this concept to the Council Economic Development Committee in order to get kind of a preliminary read and feedback regarding the design and ultimately, support for adding a drive-through here. We went through 2 hearings with CEDC, ultimately culminating in the design that is coming before you today. I would say at our initial meeting, CEDC had 2 concerns with the original plan. And if it's possible here, I just want to share my screen quickly here. Okay, so this was the concept that originally went to CEDC, and there were kind of 2 main concerns and feedback that came with this. One was the kind of operational flow of the site, which with our original plan here, we had changed up. We had added this drive-through queuing lane here, which circled around, and CEDC had concerns here that now you're sending traffic all through the front of the building, impacting the patio area here, too much movement around here, too much potential for bottleneck. The other issue, not surprising, was the aesthetics, as this design pushed the drive-through queue lane up close to the corner here, this important corner between Mission and Industrial. And so the feedback at that initial meeting was, I don't know, Doug, if this is, something that we really want to consider and look at here based on this current design. So we went back to the drawing board with this and came up with a new plan to try and address these comments. And really this new plan did a couple things. One, we got rid of that queuing and now moved it here along the outside and swinging back down. This allowed us to do 2 important things. One, it allowed us to really maintain the integrity of this patio area, because you'll notice it's protected now. You've got an entrance over here, nothing going on in front, and it swings around and then it curves out before you get to this patio, and there's landscaping and bioretention here. So this patio is in the same spot as it was before, protected from the drive-through, still with the corner view out to the park and strong pedestrian access out there as well. The other thing was, by moving this allowed us to add a much bigger, healthy landscape buffer around the edge of the site there that you can see here, along with some trellises and other features here to really make sure we had a strong aesthetic appearance from the side. And that increased landscape area, I feel like really will help visually out there and address concerns that we had gotten from some neighbors and other people, including CEDC. Just to give a little bit of flavor here, I know you saw the rendering, but we're kind of going with a 2-tiered approach here with this landscaping that this increased area allows us to do. For starters, we have what I think is beautiful, this Lagerstromia going through here, which is a nice flowering trees that'll ring theirs. But down below, as was mentioned in the staff report, we're benefiting from the fact that the drive-through lane is below grade. So when we add several of these bushes that get 4 to 5 feet, you can see that even with an SUV, which can get 70 to 74 inches, we should have great shielding there for the drive-through. And then that landscaping is tiered where we've got some nice flowering bushes with the ground cover roses up front, which then is in front of the Canyon Prince, which I love, very Bay Area friendly, drought tolerant. And so kind of got these layered tiers that this landscaping area allows us to do, which then ultimately, as staff showed here, I think will create this really strong aesthetic appearance and shield that drive-through ring. So that feedback was extremely helpful from CEDC. We went back to them with this revised plan. I will say, from my point of view, the feedback was positive. All three members, and one of them's on here, so he can correct me if I get out of line. Absolutely, but I believe the feedback was, you know what, these changes make sense. This is something that we could get behind and support. And so was what we were looking for, trying to get that, and was the genesis of where we are and how this design has come for you today. So that was sort of the background, our rationale, the process we've been through to date that comes before you. I'm extremely appreciative. You've been with us on lockstep. It's so exciting to finally see this project under development. And I believe that this will be the final key piece that we will be able to attract these high quality tenants with this project here that'll really benefit South Hayward. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Doug. Yeah, thank you for that piece. Okay, let's move on to commissioner questions. And let's see, let me go back to my question. I think Commissioner Mendel had his hand up first for questions.
Thank you, Chair. So some quick disclosures first. I live about a quarter mile from this site. It's not within the 1,000-foot or 500-foot that would require me to consider recusal. And I've consulted with the city attorney on multiple occasions over the years about this site, and there's no conflict and no need for me to recuse. And I do definitely feel like I can treat it fairly. And have been part of the City Council and the Economic Development Committee, as was alluded to, that participated in some of the earlier conversations. I have met with hundreds of members of the community in the Ferry Park area to talk about this site at various events over the years. And I've met with the developer a number of times and spoke with him over the years about this project site. So just wanted to disclose all of that up front. And then if we could zero in a little bit, when I got the staff report, there is a rendering in the project plans that shows the frontage with no trees on that corner, and it's just very wide open and visible. That's the project plan rendering, page 1 of attachment 4. And I know that, without getting into my own personal opinion, that generated some concerns amongst members of the public who felt that was not the kind of screening they were looking for. And then the image that was shown in the staff report and in Mr. Rich's presentation was very different. It showed, the shrubs and the trees. And so my question to staff is, well, first of all, which one is the right rendering? And then the follow-on question to that, because I'm assuming it's the pretty one, the follow-on question to that, and the one that I really want to get into is what sort of teeth does the city have to come back 10 years from now and require that the developer replant the trees once they've all died or been taken out or hit by a car or whatever? I guess what I'm asking is, will it always look like that? And does the city have the ability to enforce that it will always have that screening? Or is it just, pretty when it's first created and then who knows what happens later? So that's the question to staff.
Well, I'll jump in on the site design question, and the views you're seeing this evening will be the approved landscape, part of the landscape plan for this project. So I think I would want to defer to Leah on the current enforcement issues, though.
Landscape maintenance is typically a required condition of approval. If you have conditions of approval attached to your staff report, Michelle Koo, our city's landscape architect, typically gives lots and lots of conditions to support the fact that when something is proposed, that it goes in as proposed and is maintained in perpetuity for the life of the project.
Good. And so then following up on that, 10 years into the future, we're all gone. None of us here remember, there's new planners and planning commissioners and a new landscape architect who's looking at the plans. The plans don't show those trees. The project plans that are in the staff report do not show those trees. So please assure me that there will be some maintained documentation that can be referred to 10, 20 years into the future.
Understood. Is there a landscape? So those are the project plans. Is there a landscape plan that was included in your plan set, Richard? Or can the applicant speak to this? Is there typically you come with architectural plans, civil plans, landscaping plans?
Yeah. So what's going to happen is we're going to take this if this were to get approved. We would take that. The landscaping would be part of that. One of the conditions of approval is the submittal of the landscape plans, which staff then would go and verify match from here tonight. Then that becomes a part of the documented file of what's approved that then can be used as the basis for compliance down the road.
You agree with that, Leah?
Typically, we receive conceptual landscape.
Sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. Typically, we receive conceptual landscape plans as part of the planning submittal. So I'm sorry, I'm not really familiar with this plan set in order to say if there was a conceptual landscaping plan included. But typically, that would be required. It could be that the commission may want to include a condition of approval that the landscaping shall be, as demonstrated per this presentation. But you're right that when planning looks at it, it's a conceptual. Then it comes in with grading permits, civil drawings, improvement plans, which are much more, they're schematic, and they show, what needs to go in there. And that is what people are held to. The planning drawings often change from when, you first look at them to the actual, in the ground, All
right. Thank you. I know I've sort of beat that to death, but I appreciate you letting me dig in on it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Stevens. You're muted, Commissioner Stevens.
Thank you. I have one quick question regarding the traffic operations report. On page 17, it compares Starbucks located in Pleasanton on Burnell Avenue for its 95th percentile queue, which I think it derived 12 vehicles. And I completely get that this site is very similar in terms of its site layout. But I'm just curious, how does this compare to the actual site in Hayward? I'm just curious if, how Starbucks establishes its stores. Are they based on population density, income, or some other metric? So I guess, for instance, if there isn't that many Starbucks in South Hayward today, would we expect to see a queue larger than that? Or is there some other metric that goes into play related to that?
Eric, would you like to respond to that?
So what happened was we did another Starbucks study a couple years back that was in Pleasanton near on Burnell Avenue nearby Interstate 680. So we did that study for another Starbucks in Pleasanton, and the reason why we picked this location, we selected this set of data for this study was because of the pandemic. We cannot really do another new study near Hayward or within Hayward in the city, and we look at we compare the subject site here with with the Pleasanton Starbucks study that we did a couple of years back, and we found many similarities between the two. So that's why we chose this location, and we also consulted with Stephen Chang, the city transportation planner, and he agreed that this is the best we can go for, and so that's why we took this set of data and compare it with this site, and I think it's pretty representative data in terms of the setting, the land use setting around this area, and also they're all located within a suburban neighborhood. So so I think based on the data, and we can confidently conclude that the queue is most likely around 12 cars for the 95th percentile. So, and also is I mean the data can vary a little bit, but it's not going to be too much for this study.
Thank you. Does Starbucks set criteria for vehicle queues in its drive-throughs?
Doug, do you have anything to add from Starbucks perspective?
So from Starbucks perspective, they do. And from their point of view, it's interesting. They've got their science down to where there's two things that they look for in a drive-through queue. One is they want their order board at about the 8th car from the window, because they know that at that distance, by the time the next car gets to, or that 8th car moves its way and gets to the window, their order is ready. So when they have that allows them to keep the line moving. And then from their point of view, anywhere, depending on the location, from 10 to 12 car lengths in total, if they can keep that movement, it works for them as far as being able to not start backing up and having overflow. And so I would say one of the couple of things that I know Richard mentioned here, in order to make sure we keep this queue from extending out too far, is, within the queue itself, there's 12 cars, but there is space for another 2 outside of there. And then we've added, I think, some kind of cool features to this as well. One of which is we're going to have some cameras out on that corner that Starbucks has and can see, so that in the event, unlikely, but things happen, in the event the queue starts extending too long out the back, they can actually, if the order's not ready when the next car, which they're like, look, it is, we've got this down, but let's just assume worst case, we can send the cars to those waiting stalls there, keep the queue moving, we'll have a person run out and deliver it really quickly. And so it's kind of a contingency plan should systems start to break down.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Ellie Sullivan.
Thank you, Chair. 2 very quick questions here. First off, for the applicant, Mr. Rich, I appreciate the presentation you gave. The addition of the drive-through lane, you note that it is actually a sort of a depressed drive-through lane, and so you're not having the visibility on Mission Boulevard, which I think is an interesting design aspect. In inserting the drive-through to the project, did you have to change the topography of the land, i.e. are you changing what that the original plans for the build out looked like to accommodate a sunken platform for the building?
Yeah, so the answer is kind of. Okay. And so we did change it, but we had 2 control points that we couldn't change. And those 2 control points was, in fact, the industrial entrance and the Mission Boulevard entrance, right? That perimeter set. But what we did try and push it down as far as we could, so that we did, as you mentioned there, kind of a nice visual barrier there. And so there was kind of some internal grading with control points around the edges.
Okay, and to that note, what effect would the addition of this drive-through lane and any other associated changes to the build-out cause on your timeline?
So we're operating right now. Everything's moving forward. If the CUP were approved tonight, the timeline, everything flows, the project can keep moving forward. If, for some reason the commission decided, you know what, this isn't what we want, or whatever the case may be, the overall site development is moving forward. I don't think we can stop it at this point. I don't think we want to stop. I don't think anyone wants to stop it. And we'd probably have to go back. I don't know what we would do at that point. Things are moving. Like, we are ready. Grading's already going. Utilities are supposed to start in 45 days, or excuse me, in the next 4 to 5, probably in the next 4 weeks, utilities go in. The state just approved that corner piece. I'm not sure how many are aware, but the state owned a corner piece out on Mission. That got approved 10 days ago. That deed is in the process to transfer. We're coming to council for the final map. Like, everything's rolling right now. And so we're trying to keep that going.
Okay, so this should have no impact then on your timeline for build out then?
No.
Okay.
Absolutely not.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. That's all.
Thank you. Let's see, anyone else have a question at this point? I don't see any more hands. I have a quick question, Mr. Rich. I just want to ask about what your plan is to maintain the trash situation. People's biggest fears about drive-throughs are the trash that gets tossed. And so I just want to know what your commitment is to making sure the community, is considered with the trash that happens on the site and local sites. Yeah. So great question. One of the things just want to point out is, right, Valley Oak Partners, we're retaining this property. We're going to own this property. We have pride and ownership of the things we do. We've done prior projects in Hayward. We want to do future projects in Hayward. Having this be successful is of the utmost importance to us. So we have our own property management company. We're absolutely committed to keeping trash out there. It comes through regular basis in order to sweep, keep all that stuff out, put away, disposed of, off-hauled, all that kind of stuff. And so that's our commitment. This isn't, us turning around, flip it, we lose control. No, we own this. We have this. We're going to make sure that trash litter through our property management company stays picked up, clean, all those types of things. Okay, thanks. One thing we've asked in the past is if you would, somewhere post the contact information for neighbors, if there begins to be a problem at a local, empty lot that people show up and throw their trash out, that they could contact you easily. So somehow posting that contact information, I think, will help neighbors know they have a direct link to the site to get trash taken care of. That'd be great. Yep. Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Rich. Okay, I think that was it. The other commissioners asked my questions about traffic and queuing and things like that. So let's see, with no other questions from commissioners, let's move on to public comments for this item. And Ms. Chan, if you would take it away.
Thank you, Chair. If you wish to speak and you're using the Zoom application, please click the raise hand button. If you're dialing in, press *9 to raise your hand on the phone and use *6 to unmute yourself. If you are streaming the meeting through Zoom on your computer but dialing in via phone, please mute yourself so that there is no feedback sound during the meeting. Disruptive feedback or excessive noise during
Commission for 8 years in the 90s.
This meeting is being
for 12
recorded.
years on the Alameda County Planning Commission. So I know that these developments, you need to take a longer view for planning. The long view for development close to transit is to help create areas that are more economically sustainable and less auto-dependent through higher densities, providing opportunities for local serving businesses. So that with the kind of setting the stage, when Mission Village was first approved, three things disappointed me. One was that the density was very low at the bottom of the density range for the zoning. There were no inclusionary units, primarily because you typically give this developer and other developments the opportunity to pay into an in lieu fee, which he did. And third, and I think most important to what we're talking about tonight, the mixed use ratio, the ratio between the commercial and the residential was very modest, given this site, which has frontages on two major arterials. So now you're being asked to give up an additional 2,000 square feet of this very modest requirement for the commercial frontages. And what are you getting in return? This project really very minimally meets the goals and priorities for the mixed use in the general plan, and you'll be eroding these policies even further through this action. I don't really want to see you give up that 2,000 square feet of commercial just to have this auto-dependent use come in. So I'd like to see some other alternative. I'd like to see perhaps reconfiguring the commercial space to retain that 2,000 square feet, to perhaps allow for a modest tenant space for a neighborhood serving business elsewhere on the project site. Or even a bigger idea, let's have 3 or 4 inclusionary units placed on top of the commercial. And added, I think that's a reasonable trade-off to get something in return for further eroding what I think would otherwise be only a modest transit-oriented developments. And you have an example of how that's done in Sohay, where you have residential over commercial. Consider what you're doing. Consider that you're approving an auto-dependent use in a transit area. Use your discretion and don't cave on the opportunity to help make South Hayward a little bit more economically sustainable and a little bit less auto-dependent. Thank you.
Yes, this is Ro Aguilar. Some of you know me by now, and you've received my email, I assume, and I'm going to expand on those comments a little bit. I feel like I'm in an alternate universe here. While this planning commission sits and chats about a coffee shop and foliage and, you know, bushes and trellises, I'm here asking you to oppose the gifting of this to this developer of 2,000 square feet of retail space, because that's what you're doing. You're giving him back 2,000 square feet of retail space for a drive-through. If the developer wants a drive-through, they should build, this is my belief, at least 3,000 square feet of housing on top of the remaining 6,000 square feet of retail. That's a big idea. That's worthy of pursuit. That's worthy of fighting. Now, you have that decision tonight. Make yourselves important. You have the power to do this. You could support the developer and some neighbors who just want to get it done. And supporting the developer's permit, the city, as I said, is giving up 2,000 square foot of building space. But as we live comfortably in our homes in Fairway Park, how does that impatience of getting this completed weigh against the dire need for low-income housing? We're all anxious to get this done, but that's not the big goal. The big goal is housing for people who need it. And here's another opportunity. It may be only 3 or 4 people who will be inhabiting these units, but to them, it's life-changing. And the city sends a message to future developers that it is serious about inclusionary housing. Yes, it may take another year to make this change, but given the price of housing, the developer will make a hefty profit either way, if you're worried more about the developer than people who need housing. And the city could expedite the revision process and offer discounted fees in a cooperative effort, while hopefully upgrading the city's RHNA scores, which desperately need upgrading in the low-income category. Even if the developer declines the city's condition of low-income housing in exchange for approval of the drive-through, they can still pursue the currently approved plan. I urge you to take this opportunity to fight for low-income housing, not a coffee shop, not a coffee shop. Can you see the difference? Deny the permit. I urge you, deny the CUP or approve with a condition of building low-income housing. Thank you.
Okay, Chair, the next person would be Mimi. Mimi, please unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Mimi.
I would really like to spend time on saying why this project is so important for you to approve the drive-through. I have worked with Valley Oaks ever since they were sent to us by the city, which I think is over 7 years ago, trying to make this project happen. This was going to be the first project kicking off the revitalization of our community. And it has had every single bad luck thing happen to it. You, the Planning Commission, already know that this community has worked more than any other community about getting affordable housing in Hayward. We had the Eden Housing Project on Mission Boulevard just up the road from this. We also worked on having the Meta Project, and now the Eden Housing Project is coming in just before Tennyson. We have done our share of affordable housing. We also made sure that there was affordable housing in the Sohay project. No neighborhood in Hayward or in Alameda County has done more for affordable housing than the Fairway Park community. And for a person who doesn't even spend half of the year living in Hayward to comment about it, who probably doesn't even know all the things that the people who live in this community year in and year out do actually for affordable housing, to spend time wasting on something like this is absolutely, forgive me, infuriating. Absolutely infuriating. For 20 years, people like me have been working on making this a better community and also affordable housing. This project we have been working on for over 7 years, and Starbucks is an anchor store. It will bring in something else and make that corner a really wonderful place to match along with the other retail in Sohay. It is important that this does not get stopped again. Please do not put another roadblock in this. We have been waiting in this community for more than half a decade to see this be a phoenix rising from the Holiday Bowl thing. Please, for God's sake, approve this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mimi. Please mute yourself, Mimi.
Okay.
Thank you. Chair, that's all I see at this time.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Chan. Okay, I'm going to close the public comment period and let us move on to commissioner discussion on this item. Commissioner Goldstein, why don't you go ahead and start us out?
Yeah, thank you. You know, when I moved to Hayward in 2005, in fact, in the Fairway Park, the golf course community there, Twin Bridges, actually not even far from where Al lives. So maybe I should declare I'm very familiar with the location. I feel like I'm very much a part of the Fairway Park neighborhoods. I am a member of the Fairway Park Neighborhoods Association, and I live about a mile up the hill now, so I no longer live in Twin Bridges, but I'm up the hill. And this location, I think, has an impact on me and all the other people that live in the community. And when I moved to Twin Bridges in 2005, the Holiday Bowl had just closed. I did not know that. I was, I like the bowl. And so when I saw that property, I was pretty excited about, taking the kids over there, doing some bowling. Thought it would be a real hoot until I learned that it had closed. Now, it had stayed closed from, I think it actually closed in 2004 and has, until it literally burned down last year, it's basically just been an eyesore, a nuisance, an attractant to homeless people, and otherwise just a gross eyesore. So my feeling goes along the lines with Mimi that this project, Mission Village, is a major improvement, really cornerstone, as are some of the other local construction, Sohay and the Eden Housing and some others, really vast improvement over what's been before and transformative. So each new project builds on what's come before, and we have great hope for the future. Would Starbucks be my first choice for some kind of a restaurant opportunity there? Yeah, maybe not. I mean, I got nothing against Starbucks, not exactly my first choice, but I do respect, first of all, the amount of time and effort that Valley Oaks Partners has put into continuing with this project. They could have bailed on it. They could have sold off the rights. There's any number of things that could have happened that all would have been pretty tragic. So I appreciate that Valley Oaks Partners is continuing with the project, that they're committed to seeing it through. And quite frankly, we're really within a few yards of making a touchdown on this project. And I definitely respect that. Glenn Kirby and Ro Aguilar are great members of the community who are always advocating for inclusionary housing. And if it were not a huge problem for Valley Oaks Partners to maybe put some inclusionary housing on top, I think that would be a great addition to it. But I don't know, unless Richard Petnod, if you wanted to comment on the feasibility of such a thing, have at it. Got to come off of mute first there, Rich.
Did you want Mr. Rich to comment on that? Oh, Richard, sorry. Go ahead, Richard.
No, well, I don't know that we know what the feasibility is at this point because it just hasn't been explored, what it would take to do that. So, they've gone through the process with the CDC and, arrived at this point. And so it would be, we'd be looking at a whole new study to analyze that, having to come back through all these processes.
Mr. Rich, is there any value to you to consider putting inclusionary housing on top of that retail component?
Yeah, so, look, we're out there, we do inclusionary housing, do it on projects all the time. In this particular case, adding it on top of the retail building wouldn't be feasible. I would love to do it. It's just not feasible at this point.
Yeah. All right. I respect that. Okay. Thank you. That's all I had to say. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Let's see. Commissioner Stevens.
So the market really tells us what's economically feasible. And I want to commend both staff and the applicant for rapidly modifying this project and bringing this forward. I'm totally in support of this. I would only suggest doing a modification to condition of approval number 14, consistent with Commissioner Mendel and Ms. Schmidt's comments related to a landscape plan that's consistent with what we've seen this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Ali Sullivan.
Thank you, Chair. First off, thanks to city staff for the presentation and for all the details, and to the applicant. Mr. Rich, appreciate the work that went into rejigging this project. Obviously, the ability to attract and maintain retail has significantly changed over the last year and a half. And what might have been feasible 2 years ago is certainly not feasible or as feasible today. The way I'm thinking about this from a square footage standpoint, and Mr. Rich, correct me if I'm wrong, but my assumption would be that the reduction in 2,000 square feet of retail space to be paved over is probably going to reduce the amount of revenue that you're able to derive from the space, because retail equals revenue for the developer and for the maintainer of the property. And so I don't necessarily see this as a chance that you're trying to cash in on this drive-through. It really seems to me that this is more of a business reality, and you're missing out on additional retail, which I'm sure everyone would prefer to have, because that is able to derive revenue from, is the reality. With that said, I think in the world of understanding that you need to have these types of facilities for food service, for QSR restaurants, I think it's very well done. I appreciate the fact that it is you've taken time to redevelop what that land looks like. I really appreciate the significant landscaping that went into the project. And overall, I think it is going to be a significant net positive for the community. I grew up just up the street from Holiday Bowl. It's been an eyesore. It was an eyesore when it was still open. It's been an eyesore for the last 15 years. I have wanted nothing more than to see some great development on this corner. And is it perfect? Is it exactly what everyone might have wanted? Maybe, maybe not. But is it going to be a net benefit for the community, for the neighborhood, for the people that live there, like myself, like my family? I think it will be. And so from that standpoint, I'm very happy to support it and plan to support it this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Mendel.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, what a long and winding road this has been. It is worth noting, I think if we were starting from scratch on this site today, that the plan that we would come up with would be, different from what was first approved, I think 6 years ago. But at the time, this was kind of groundbreaking. It was a commercial and retail mixed use site, walkable to the BART station, and in an area where we had a lot of trouble getting developers interested in developing. And it's taken a little while through, for reasons that are not the developer's fault. There were some environmental issues with the site, and it's taken a while. And so the plan that was sort of forward-looking, in my opinion, 6 years ago, and now it's starting to look, maybe not exactly what we would do today, but it's still a good plan. It's still a good plan, and we're kind of on the 1 yard line here. The grading has started. The construction is underway, and as Mr. Rich alluded, this is sort of the final piece that's needed to make this a reality. And I will confess, I as a member of the commission, as a council, I fought really, really hard to make sure that commercial component was included and that it was viable and that there would be an amenity there, not just housing, but a park and retail for the rest of the community. And it's small, it was 8,000 square feet, now 6. And that's small, and it's difficult to make that small of a commercial site work. And so I admit, I've sort of been a little worried over time that it might not come to fruition and match the vision that we all had for it many, many years ago. And the reality is that whether, a Starbucks drive-through is the perfect tenant or not, it is a tenant that will guarantee the long-term viability of that commercial retail site, in my opinion. Is it exactly what I would put there if I were, could wave a magic wand? Maybe not. But it's a good addition. It will be popular. It is popular with members of the community. A lot of positive feedback that I've heard. The major concern that I had was over the appearance on the corner. And I think that I sort of alluded to, and Ms. Schmidt, you alluded to, and Commissioner Stevens alluded to a condition or a slight adjustment, perhaps in condition number 14 to explicitly state that the visuals from the staff report and that landscaping plan would be binding in perpetuity and could be enforceable and easily accessible to future staff. And so I'm going to move the staff recommendation with that one change, that we make it explicitly clear that the landscaping visuals are the ones that we expect to see long term.
Okay.
Hopefully that.
Sorry, Al. All right, Al, do you want to wait so Commissioner Kenda and I can get our comments in before you make the motion, or do you want to make the motion now?
I would prefer to make it now.
Okay.
We can always discuss the motion afterwards.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine with me. Yeah.
I'm happy to second, Chair.
Okay, great. So we have a motion by Commissioner Mendel, seconded by Commissioner Ali Sullivan. The motion to approve the staff recommendations with the addition of language that includes the drawing that we saw tonight, basically from Mr. Rich on the landscaping. Is that right, Commissioner Mendel? Okay. Okay, yes. Commissioner, thanks. Commissioner discussion. Commissioner Kenda, why don't you go ahead first?
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to just start out by saying I felt like I was watching a little bit of a debate in public comment. I kind of like that. Some folks having some different opinions and arguing them very thoroughly. I appreciate all three of the speakers really for sharing their ideas. I'll be honest, I hadn't thought about any kind of inclusive additions to this unit, mostly because I know that this had been worked on for a very long time. I'm also someone who is a very staunch affordable housing and inclusive housing advocate. And so, of course, my ears were perked about this idea. Oh, is that possible? My initial thought here is that given the rest of sort of the project as it is, the time that's gone into this, it doesn't seem like the best opportunity or space right now in this moment to kind of change this project at this point, or try to sort of, twist the arm of the developer to do something different that has already been approved by CEDC. So I'm of the mind that, I appreciate what the developer's doing. I understand the challenges that have come out of COVID, and then also, obviously, coffee is a hit. So it's right off a mission. It does seem like a good option there on the corner. I actually like what Commissioner Mendel had said. If I had a magic wand, I might go back in time and change this entire development on the whole spec, because I have a very different, I think, politic than some of the commissioners and council who may have come before. But, I think that where it is now, I have to say that I'm going to support the project. And, I really appreciate, the applicant coming forward. And also, it's really good to see you, Richard. Glad you're taking on this project. And I definitely hope to see you all soon in person if we can get there. But yeah, that's my comment. Thank you for letting me share.
Thank you. I'm going to be in support of the motion as well. Well, we had two really passionate comments tonight from the community. If you look at the bulk of the emails we received, including the very last minute documents received after publication this evening, most of the comments are in support of this development and this drive-through, because they agree with most of the comments tonight that this has been a really long haul and people want to see this move forward. And if the Starbucks drive-through is a way that we can move forward, then I think it seems to me the bulk of the community comment is in favor of that. I like a couple other comments. I live in Fairway Park, and this has been an eyesore forever. I've been waiting to have a really nice gateway to our part of town, and it's been such a blight right there on the corner. And so to see something with some really nice landscaping, so I think that's going to be an important amendment. Commissioner Mendel, thank you. And to see the development sort of rising up behind it, I think will be a nice viewpoint. I think if we had doubled up that height and made that a residential plus retail, that wouldn't have given us quite the view I think we want in that area. So, notwithstanding, Mr. Kirby's and Ms. Aguilar's comments, of course, several, many of us on the commission, most of us on the commission are very interested in proposing affordable housing going forward. We're always looking for those opportunities. I encourage you to keep fighting and advocating for that. And watching these meetings to make sure that you're keeping us honest on that. But for this development, I'm in support of the motion. I think this is the way to move forward. And I appreciate Mr. Rich's hard work on this and the surrounding community's hard work on this. So that's my comments. Let's see, do we have any, Commissioner Menda, you didn't want to say anything else, right? Did you just have your hand up? Nope. Okay, great. Then Ms. Chan, why don't we take a roll call vote at this point on the motion by Commissioner Mendel, seconded by Ali Sullivan.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to confirm Commissioner Mendel's motion includes that the modification to condition of approval number 14, that the landscape visuals that were presented tonight be made part of the permanent record, part of the permanent plans, correct? Is that a good way to word it? Okay, yeah, very good. Thank you.
I think that captures it. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Commissioner Ali Sullivan.
I'm sorry, excuse me, Commissioner Mendel. Wasn't it also that the landscaping be maintained in perpetuity?
Yes, and I think that Ms. Schmidt had indicated that we have the enforcement power to do that already, and that doesn't require additional conditions. But what was lacking, in my opinion, was the clarity as to exactly what needed to be maintained. And I think the visuals combined with what Ms. Schmidt indicated was the city's existing authority achieves the result.
Okay, as long as we're clear.
Yep. Thank you.
So Joe, if you want to word it differently, can you provide me that?
Of course.
Thank you. All right, here we go. Commissioner Ali Sullivan.
Here we go. Aye.
Commissioner Goldstein.
Yes, I approve.
Commissioner Mendel.
Yes.
Commissioner Okenda.
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens.
Yes.
Chair Roche.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. And sorry, go ahead, Ms. Chan.
No, I just say all ayes. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, the motion passes 6-0. Thank you. And thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Rich. Thank you, Richard, and everyone who was part of this project. Yeah, great. So we now will move on to the next item, which is another beefy item this evening. Let's see, item number 2 is a proposed development of a new approximately 116,844 square foot industrial building requiring site plan review approval and a historic resources demolition permit, certification of an environmental impact report, and adoption of a mitigation, monitoring, and reporting program and statement of overriding considerations at 4150 Point Eden Way, assessor parcel number 461-0085-020-02, Jerry Owen on behalf of U-Haul and Americo Real Estate, the property owner. Thank you. And let's see, I think, Lee, are you doing the staff report on this one? Thank you.
Yep, I'm doing that one. So I'm going to share my screen with you and pull up the presentation. Okay, can everybody see this one? U-Haul development? Okay, assuming yes. So this is a public hearing. It's related to site plan review and historic resources demolition permit, and its related environmental analysis for a new U-Haul development project at 4150 Point Eden Way. So as noted in the staff report, I wonder if this, can you, let me get rid of that so you guys can see. As you saw in the staff report, this project encompasses more than just the project site at 4150 Point Eden Way. It has an eastern component, which is shown here on the right side of the right side of the PowerPoint, and then the western component. The western component is about 32 acres, and the eastern component is about 6.8 acres. And here we're zooming in on that eastern component, which is the site of the proposed development. Currently, the site, which is outlined in yellow, has an approximately 12,300 square foot structure. It was previously used as a salt production plant for the Oliver Brothers Salt Company, which operated in the first half of the 20th century. The structure is dilapidated and it's vandalized and has been used by squatters over the past several decades. However, both the building as the former salt processing plant and the site itself are listed on the State Register for Historic Resources due to the importance of salt processing in the area and the region. Just to orient you, State Route 92 runs along the northern part of the project site. Baylands surround the project site on the northwest and south of the site, and then you have industrial development just to the west. The line in red here indicates the current alignment of the San Francisco Bay Trail. So you kind of come along Point Eden Way, turn south to along the eastern property line between these two industrial developments, and then you go south along the San Francisco Bay Trail. So that's the current alignment. And then here we have some pictures of the site. This is kind of a close-up of the old salt processing plant. Here it is from another perspective. And then here you're looking at some of the site. There is some portions that have water on it. So they're sort of intermittent wetlands. And then this is looking out over sort of the salt flats, the 32-acre preserve. And then this is a picture of the existing Bay Trail. Here on the left side of the screen, you can see the Bay Trails kind of coming along Point Eden Way, parallel to Point Eden Way, and it curves around. And this on the right side of the screen shows you the trail as it runs between the project site and the industrial development on the other side. So right now it does go between those two industrial sites. So now to the proposed project. The project would involve construction of a new industrial building that would be about 116,800 square feet in size. About 114,000 square feet of the warehouse of the building would be used as a warehouse, and approximately 2,800 square feet would be used as an office, which would be located up here at the front of the building along the State Route 92. The office in the building would be used to house U-Haul sort of regional corporate offices, and the warehouse would house storage pods, materials, and trucks. When it's operational, the applicant said there would be about 20 to 25 people working on site. Access to the site would be from the terminus of Point Eden Way, so you'd come in off that driveway. And there'd be about 79 parking stalls on the site, and about 16% of the site would be landscaped. There would also be an approximately 800 square foot employee amenity area right up at the front of the project site. So I'll show you. This is a close-up of the amenity, and that's going to have sort of landscaping along the frontage, some meandering pathways, a shaded dining area, and some portable seating areas. So that's along the project frontage. Now moving on to the building elevations. This top elevation you can see would be the front of the building facing State Route 92. The one below it is the rear elevation, so that would be facing Baylands. The west elevation would face a realigned Bay Trail, which I'm going to show you in the next slide. And that's really facing sort of west, so looking out over the Baylands. And then the bottom elevation is the interior facing east elevation. So you can see the office up at the front, but overall it's really a warehouse behind. Overall, the applicant is really trying to focus the attention on the frontage of the building that faces State Route 92. And along both the western elevation and front elevation, you see sort of projecting glass enclosed office area, a mix of architectural materials and colors, some varying roof lines, some vertical and horizontal score lines and materials to sort of break up that massing along both mainly the western and front elevations. In addition, on those elevations, there's some sculptural elements that show birds, and then some markings and paint colors to mimic sort of the natural surrounding and the grasses that are around the site. And then here's a rendering of what that corner would look like, that sort of northwest corner. So as I just noted, the project would include a proposed realignment of the Bay Trail. As I showed you on that early slide, the Bay Trail kind of comes along Point Eden Way to orient you and then follows that green path that's shown on this exhibit. As part of the proposed project, the applicant would like to realign the Bay Trail to go along State Route 92, which is shown here in orange, and then turn south and go on the outside of the building. So be between sort of those baylands and the bay and the new building. And then it would go south and then continue on and go east and then meet up with the current alignment. The applicant reached out to the East Bay Regional Parks District early on in this process. It was well over a year ago, and has been talking to them about this. I know they're continuing meetings, and conditions of approval would require that the East Bay Regional Parks District approve this realignment, that the trail that's put in meets all their design standards, and that the trail be constructed prior to issuance of a certificate of occupancy for the building to ensure that that public amenity, continues on even with this redevelopment project. So moving on to the environmental analysis that was prepared for the project. The city did hire Rincon consultants to prepare an environmental impact report. This is all in the staff report, and it's also in the findings for the project, but I just sort of want to go through this so it's really clear as part of the presentation. In November of 2020, the city issued a notice of preparation of an environmental impact report with an initial study that accompanied it. And the reason why staff determined that an EIR was important here was because of the historic resource and the sort of biological resources and wetlands around the site. And I think that I put in the staff report in the background section that this site has been looked at by multiple developers, and people have proposed developments on this project and walked away from it because of the environmental sort of like this process was just not worth it for some developers. Typically, they come in with spec buildings, and so when U-Haul purchased this site, they purchased it for themselves. They're going to use it, so they see this as an investment in the sort of the corporate identity in the area and an investment in Hayward. So they decided to take this forward and go through this EIR, which is a pretty onerous and long and expensive process. So back up to the initial study that accompanied that notice of preparation. The initial study found that there were potentially significant impacts in the areas of biological resources, cultural resources, hazards and hazardous materials, transportation, and tribal cultural resources. The initial study found less than significant impacts in all the other areas. So our EIR really focused on those project areas where there were potential impacts. A draft EIR was prepared and a notice of availability was published and routed around for a 45-day public review ranging from early April to late May of 2021. The draft EIR includes, a project description, evaluation of the topic areas I just described, and then some other CEQA required sections, growth inducement, irreversible impacts, and significant and unavoidable impacts. The draft EIR found that all the impacts could be mitigated to a level of less than significant, with the exception of cultural resources. Because of that salt processing plant, that structure in the site, it is on a state register. It is a designated historic resource. So even though there are mitigation measures that are proposed to document the extant structure, to do archival footage and pictures, and then to install an interpretive display at the site. While those mitigation measures may sort of reduce the impacts of it just disappearing off the earth completely, the impact of removal of that building and construction of the new building will remain significant and unavoidable. So that is the related to the statement of overriding considerations that you're being asked to adopt. So the draft EIR, in addition to all that stuff I just described, also includes alternatives to the project. In this draft EIR, we looked at a no project alternative. That's always in there. A reduced development alternative, scaling back, kind of moving behind the structure that's there, and an alternative sites analysis. The alternative sites analysis that was really fleshed out in the EIR was at 3636 Enterprise, which is also in the industrial area. And then some other alternative sites were also in there, but they were not fully fleshed out because we just sort of looked at them and said that they wouldn't meet the criteria of the project objectives at all. So they were sort of like just considered and rejected. The EIR did conclude that the environmentally superior alternative was the no-build alternative because there's just like no impacts related to that, which just remain in place. No impacts to biology. It would just, there would be sort of detrimental impacts related to like, loss of the potential for jobs there. The fact that that structure is, the site of multiple community appearance, vandalism, squatters. There have been multiple break-ins there. I get calls from the Parks District on a pretty regular basis that people are in there. And so there are other impacts like social, economic. The site would remain undeveloped. That would result as with the no-build alternative. It was also followed by the alternative site alternative as the next least impactful alternative, but it was found in the draft EIR that that alternative wouldn't meet some project objectives related to sort of the western component, retention of that as open space in perpetuity and maintenance by the property owner. It wouldn't result in this nice realignment of the Bay Trail. It wouldn't result in elimination of the dilapidated structure at the gateway of the city, so that, it's not the first thing that people see when they're driving across the 92 into Hayward. So those were all project objectives, were to place a gateway structure there, to have economic benefits from putting a building, from developing that site and having jobs there. So the alternatives were rejected. The city did receive 5 comment letters on the draft EIR. Those letters and responses to those letters, as well as any sort of text changes, were included in the final EIR. That final EIR was posted to the city's website, and hard copies were placed at City Hall in the library, and also sent to the commenters on June 25th. All of the proposed mitigation measures that are included in the attachment to your staff report were included as conditions of approval for the project. And then just want to reiterate that the commission, in addition to certifying this EIR, which includes the draft and final EIR, and adopting the mitigation monitoring and reporting plan, the commission is going to be asked to adopt a statement of overriding considerations. I sort of already talked about this, but removal of the structure would eliminate a dilapidated and unsafe structure. The proposed project would result in development of a currently underutilized site at a gateway entrance to the city, and it would result in the establishment of a 32-acre preserve in the city's Western Baylands. So briefly, you're being asked to make findings related to site plan review, the historic demolition permit, and CEQA. As I already stated in the staff report and in the findings that were attached to that staff report, staff does believe that you can make the findings because the project will result in a well-designed glass-fronted building, incorporates a variety of building planes and materials, and sculptural elements that are reflective of the natural surroundings. The project would result in a realignment of the Bay Trail to take advantage of western views to the bay instead of running between 2 industrial sites. The development, as detailed in the staff report, is consistent with general plan goals and policies, as well as the industrial district standards and design regulations. And the Planning Commission is going to be asked to make a finding that they reviewed the EIR statement of overriding considerations related to demolition of the historic resource. Some significant conditions of approval that were added. I already discussed the realignment in East Bay Regional Park District approval. Staff is recommending that a condition that all the lights in the building be turned off at night to minimize impacts on surrounding land, so the wetlands, the wildlife there, and that all the site lighting, like if there's parking lot lighting, has to be designed to prevent spillover impacts. that the proposed 32-acre preserve be maintained in perpetuity, and all the mitigation measures were made conditions of approval of the project. So I will end the staff recommendation, and then I will address the correspondence that just came in at about 6 o'clock tonight related to the draft EIR. So staff is recommending that the Planning Commission approve site plan review and historic demolition permit for the proposed U-Haul development, subject to the conditions of approval, and certifies the EIR and related findings, and adopts the mitigation monitoring and reporting program and statement of overriding considerations that were prepared for the project. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I can open it up again if we want to look at the project plans. But I do want to acknowledge city staff did receive about a 20-page letter at 6 o'clock tonight, which was forwarded to the Planning Commission as well. Our George Dix, who from Rincon Consultants, who prepared the draft EIR, has been my best friend for the past 9 months, is on the line. He did review the letter and is prepared to speak to that. So George, I want to offer you the opportunity on this presentation to sort of step in and summarize what you heard, and how you think it relates to the draft EIR and the recommendation that the Planning Commission move forward with the certification.
Sure. Thank you, Commission. Thanks for hearing me today. Thanks for that presentation, Leah. As Leah explained, we received 5 comment letters on the draft EIR that was circulated. One of those came from a law firm. It was part of their letter. They worked with a wildlife biologist out of Davis named Dr. Smallwood. And he prepared a separate sort of comment letter that was an attachment to the law firm's comment letter. And in his work, he visited the site. He did his own sort of wildlife survey to figure out what species were there, or what species he thought might be there. And then he prepared a very thorough comment letter addressing what he felt were deficiencies in the draft EIR. As sort of standard procedure, we went through Dr. Smallwood's letter. We went through the entire letter from the law firm, including Dr. Smallwood's, and broke it out into comments. Each paragraph, or sometimes there'd be multiple comments in a single paragraph, but we broke it out comment by comment, and then we would provide written responses to each of those comments. Some comments didn't necessarily pertain about the draft EIR, some were on the project design, some were actually about mitigation measures in the EIR and that sort of thing. And what it ended up being is we were able to address all of his comments in writing without requiring recirculation of the draft EIR. Nothing that Dr. Smallwood identified warranted a new analysis or identified a potentially new significant impact that we didn't feel like was adequately addressed in the EIR. He recommended some new mitigation measures, but again, we felt the mitigation that we had already provided in the draft EIR were sufficient. We demonstrated in the EIR that they were sufficient at reducing significant impacts to less than significant biological resources. So Leah provided those written responses to the law firm couple weeks ago, and just tonight we got a sort of a rebuttal letter from Dr. Smallwood where he went through many of our responses to his comments and provided sort of a rebuttal to most of them, and provided an additional explanation. Tonight's letter it's quite long. It's about 17 pages, so I don't know that necessarily need to go through the entire letter. But for example, in his original comment letter, he voiced concern that the draft EIR didn't really evaluate the potential for nuisance species to be attracted to the site, such as domestic house cats, feral cats, rats, nori rats, those sorts of things. And if they were attracted to the project, they could adversely impact the native mice species like the salt marsh habitat nearby. However, we provided a pretty thorough response to that sort of thing, explaining that it's an industrial site. It's not a restaurant that has food scraps or that sort of trash. It's not a residential development where people keep pets such as house cats. And so that was sort of the gist of our response to that comment, for example. And then so tonight, in the letter that we received tonight, he provided a rebuttal to that saying that he observed a cat coming from industrial property to the east of the project site. And so therefore industrial sites do attract house cats or feral cats. Again, we had some information from the applicant team that there was actually a fox that lives on that site. But nonetheless, we feel it's an industrial site. We don't know that the cat that Dr. Smallwood saw came from inside that building or just came from that direction. And so I just wanted to kind of give you an example of what tonight's letter shows or says. And I don't think, we could spend time responding to Dr. Smallwood, but I don't think it's going to impact the draft EIR. The things he says tonight, we've already addressed in comments. He's just sort of reiterated why he still thinks his comment is valid. And we do appreciate his comments. And it's the sort of thing that I would be happy to reply to, in a separate sort of letter, separate from CEQA. But I think that our final EIR, which includes the responses to his letter, is adequate and sufficient for CEQA. It demonstrates why those impacts have been addressed and made, or why there are no impacts in the first place. And so I recommend that, despite receiving this letter tonight, that the commission move forward with certification of the EIR.
Great. All right. Thank you. Leah, were you done with your presentation on that?
Yeah, I'm done.
Okay.
Happy to answer questions. The applicant is also here from U-Haul, Jerry Owen and his team. He may want to say something to you. I don't think they have a formal presentation, but I think that he might want to say a few words.
Okay, yeah, great. Mr. Owen, did you want to say something before we move on?
Yes, please, if you guys don't mind.
Go ahead, please.
So first and foremost, I just want to thank Leah for the presentation and her help for the life of the project to this point. We've had a lot of consultants and agencies already help us to get to this point. And I do want to go through and thank them, if that's okay. First, East Bay Regional Park District, we've been dealing with Sean Dugan and Philip Coffin. San Francisco Bay Regional Water Quality Control Board, Brian Wines. From the U.S. Army Corps, we've been dealing with Greg Brown. On my consultant side, historical, Edward Yarbrough. Biology, which is WRA, Hope Kingman. Landscape architect, Bruce Jett, Julia Diner. And that's Jet Landscape Architecture and Design. Civil Engineering, Adam Mahoney and Stephen Shroop with Kieran Wright. Leah Schmidt, obviously our city planner, was helping us. Renata with AC Martin has been an absolute great help, and she is my favorite. I do want to say that we understand and we want this to be the gateway to Hayward. We feel the design that we have put forth shows that, both to the western and facing the 92 highway. We also do want to pay tribute to the Oliver Salt Company. I understand the building on site is dilapidated. We don't want to just forget about Oliver Salt. It's a big part of Hayward. At that building there, it's been there since the 1930s. And we want to make sure that we pay tribute to that. We actually have wood on site, very large wood timbers, that we are going to put into the design, into the employee area that's out front in the landscape. And as long as it tests okay, we are going to put that in design and to help that. Along the Bay Trail, we also want to put a few signs, just wildlife preserve, also maybe some history of the property itself and all the changes it's gone through. I thank you for your time. That's all I got for tonight. And thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let us move on to commissioner questions on this item. Let's see. Commissioners, do you have questions for staff or the applicant? No, wow. No questions. Okay, because I actually have a few. So I'll just start then. If anyone thinks one, you can jump in after me. I wanted to ask, as far as the traffic impact, I saw that there was a traffic impact analysis done for the employees that are be coming to and from the site. But what about any traffic impact on trucks or trailers coming to pick up it said that there's going to be U-Haul storage pods, materials and trucks. I mean, it seems to me trucks are going to have to come to drop those off, pick those up. Is that an ongoing thing, or is this long-term storage? What's going to be the impact on the local roads on trucks entering your site? I didn't see anything on that.
So our traffic analysis looks at VMT, and that's the CEQA issue.
Okay.
So the CEQA issue, what generates VMT is employee traffic.
Yeah.
And in industrial areas, you are either screened out of the traffic for virtue of where you're located, or you're not screened out. In this case, it was not screened out. So the CEQA analysis looked at the VMT impacts, and they have like a couple of things or a few things that they can choose to reduce those employee impacts. And those were in the conditions of approval. Our engineering staff evaluated the proposed project, including the number of truck trips that they would have based on the use and the size of the warehouse, looked at the local conditions, and did not have any concerns about the trucks going through that area, accessing the site, or the number of trucks that would be generated by this site. This is not going to be a place where you go to rent U-Haul trucks. This is really their corporate office and then a storage. So Jerry, you may be able to say, because I think you guys are already in operation, like I don't think you have very many truck trips, or that enough that our engineering division was concerned about it.
Okay, yeah, I was just wondering, because are those storage pods for like constant use back and forth? I know people are not going to this site to actually rent things, or is that where they stay and they're constantly collected and dropped back off?
I think operationally is like they're stored there and then they go out to other sites throughout the region. Jerry, you understand, like, so it's not as if the pod stays there and then goes out to someone's house every day. It's like they're stored there in general, and then they go to U-Haul sites from, San Francisco all the way to like Livermore and down, there is like a big regional area. And so I'm not 100% sure. Jerry, do you have more information about how you guys operate?
Yeah, it's stored and distributed. That's going to be the main warehouse in our area. We're not going to be obviously having any kind of truck rental or trailer rental out of that. Just to be clear.
I was just wondering how active this warehouse is going to be, because the way it reads is that there's 22 employees, and that's kind of like the bulk of what's going on. But it seems to me there's going to be some amount of warehouse traffic that happens.
That is correct. Yes.
Okay.
Our engineering division evaluated it and wasn't concerned enough to do a local transportation analysis in addition to the VMT analysis.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Owen and Leah, for that. Okay. Let's see. I wanted to ask about the in perpetuity deed for the 32 acres for the salt ponds. I think that's great, but that there's not going to be any sort of easement to go onto that property. There was nothing. I can't remember what the wording is. But I saw, let me just see if I can find where that was, because it was asked about also in the EIR, that should something, in the future, if those salt ponds need to be reinforced so that I think it was the walls of the salt ponds don't deteriorate and leach into the marsh, or if in the future in our Hayward, shoreline plan, if we want to build up berms or something like that, what will be the plan going forward to access that if we're sort of like acknowledging that there's going to be no easement included in the language at this point?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that what the purpose of the condition was, and I can let the applicant, my understanding of it is that it will be preserved and not used for any agricultural use in the future. There are some uses that could go, I think that it was in the EIR, but that could potentially happen there. And what the applicant is saying is we're going to hold it as open space in perpetuity. We'll maintain it. But Hope, you want to jump in here?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Hope Kingman with WRA. What we're currently proposing is that a deed restriction be placed over the 32 acres, which is a legally binding document that would have very specific prohibited and allowed uses. And one of them would provide the opportunity in the future if someone else wanted the opportunity to restore that marsh, that they could. And so that wouldn't be a precluded activity. It's just not currently under the proposed project. But there would be like the removal of trash and the maintenance of the surrounding area around it. But there is a very large levee that separates these 32 acres from the California Department of Fish and Wildlife Reserve, and that levee is actually on their property, and that would be subject to their continued ongoing maintenance. And so I don't see it being an issue as far as long-term preservation of that feature, because it's not tidally influenced. It's sort of like these isolated salt ponds that no longer receive tidal influence from the bay, essentially. So did you have any other?
No, that's helpful. Yeah, I just kind of wanted to sort of think through like how that would happen in the future when we needed to get access to that site, because it was specifically, not included in the language of the EIR. So I wanted to ask about that.
So the Regional Water Quality Control Board has provided a specific deed restriction document that they'll be approving, and they will have some oversight over that particular development of that document and the long-term management plan of those 32 acres. And so I feel confident that allocating that responsibility to the Regional Water Quality Control Board's overview and approval will ensure the city's interests as well.
Okay. Thank you. That's really helpful. The other thing I wanted to ask about really quickly was this idea of the mitigation credits. And, because I just sort of wanted to ask really quick, it talks about the mitigation credits are 1-for-1 ratio. And I just something I wanted to understand. Is the 1-for-1 ratio like one acre for one credit? I mean, how do the mitigation credits work? And where does that sort of, where does the credit then go to later to help shore up marshlands, wetlands around the bay?
So the credit would be purchased from the San Francisco Bay Wetland Mitigation Bank, and that bank was established and approved by all of the resource agencies. In other words, the Corps, the Regional Water Quality Control Board, the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And when you purchase wetland credits, because you're purchasing them from an established bank that's pre-approved, you're purchasing and being allowed to debit from that bank the acreage of the area that you're impacting for the development. And so mitigation credits from approved mitigation banks are generally at a 1-to-1 mitigation ratio. If you were to develop your own wetlands, you'd have to generally create 2 acres to replace the 1 acre that you're impacting because there's temporal loss. But in the case of this bank, there's no temporal loss. So it's just paying a fee to a mitigation bank.
Okay, thanks. That's helpful because that was something, I wasn't quite sure what was happening. There were some questions about that also, I know, in the EIR. And then let's see, the other thing is, just looking back at sort of the alternatives that were discussed in the EIR, if we did nothing, then the wetlands, the way they are, they're preserved. But if we did nothing and that building is allowed to deteriorate, do the lead and asbestos problems in that building then become a further impact, environmental, like disaster impact on the area?
I'll let maybe George answer this one. Do you have any thoughts about that, George, based on your work on other EIRs?
Well, sure. There's been some remediation on the site, and there's been a RNP that's been developed for the site. So some work has already been done. The building itself dates back quite a while, so it's quite possible that there's lead-based paint in there on some of the painted surfaces, and possibly asbestos, things that we've used in the past that we've since learned are hazardous. And so if we left the building in place, there's a possibility that as it continues to deteriorate on the site, things like lead-based paint chip off and in the soil, down into the soil, that sort of thing. And as Leah mentioned, it also gets squatters, so those types of people will be exposed to the pollutants if it remain on site. However, I would say that most of the contamination has already occurred in the past. So what you'd be dealing with now is just some of these smaller remedial things like lead-based paint.
Okay. And then along the same lines as the alternatives, did we ever was it ever an option to look at, a conservation group purchasing the land to preserve this in perpetuity or, going forward? Just because, looking at the land, I can see why people are interested in preserving what's out there. So just curious about that.
We did approach the California Department of Fish and Wildlife regarding taking over ownership of that salt ponds, but the remediation of the salts that have accumulated in those salt ponds actually make that a really expensive undertaking. It actually was determined that all of the salts and surface soils would have to be excavated and taken to a toxic landfill before that area could be restored to marsh. And so at this time, it's not really a viable option, but that doesn't mean that it can't be something that's considered. And deeded to a conservation organization in the future.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to try to hurry up, guys, but I just had a lot of questions. I also wanted to ask, my understanding there isn't a specific flood plan in place. So like when buildings are going to be built right along the coast here, is there some sort of plan that says you now have to build up a certain height level to avoid the flooding that we heard that's going to occur? It sounds like the owner is taking into consideration that the parking lots will probably flood during different times at high tide. So just wondering, is there an actual plan that specifies these building requirements at this point?
Yeah, there's actually a floodplain ordinance, and our engineers worked with Renata. You're nodding your head. If you want to step in here and talk about how our engineers all worked together and did the floodplain stuff and elevations, you know, do you want to step in and do this?
Yeah, sure. And in addition to that, we also have FEMA guidelines that we use, and we need to meet standards with. And as you know, we will continue to work with the engineering team and with the San Francisco Bay to ensure that we exceed and we maintain a level of confidence that especially the Bay Trail is not inundated during high sea level rise. So this is really not the finish line for us. If you were to approve this project tonight, it's really an opportunity for us to continue to work with the city staff, engineering, and the other agency, including the U.S. Corps and the Regional Water Board.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I was just thinking of like building height, you know, and building parking lots on the, I know over in the peninsula, those buildings that Facebook build, like all those lower levels are open parking garages as a mitigation measure. I'm just wondering if those kind of plans are in place for us.
And just to briefly answer your question, the building pad is currently 2 feet above. Okay. And the only thing that will be flooded will be the loading dock area that is recessed 4 feet below. So that's the plan.
Okay. And then on the building side, I just wanted to ask, you know, on the glass front, is there a concern that there's going to be glare coming off of 92 on that glass fronted part of the building?
No, it's not. It's not going to be reflective.
It won't be reflective. Okay. Okay. I think, sorry to go on, you guys. I just had a lot of questions about this one. Let's move on to Commissioner Stevens.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a question. I thought years ago, the mitigation ratio for approved wetland banks was higher than 1-to-1. Has that changed?
Not if it's approved wetland bank. If you're a permittee, mitigation is at a 2-to-1 or higher, but mitigation banks generally are sold at a 1-to-1. That's the current standard that's required by both the Corps and the Regional Water Quality Control Board.
And can you discuss a little bit about why the western segment of a project was not remediated for wetlands? Like, why not do the wetlands within the project area?
Not why we're not remediating those wetlands.
Or creating wetlands on within the project area.
Most of the project area is this approximately 7-acre parcel, and it currently has scattered remnant wetland features that are actually depressional features created by some of the remediation actions over the years. And then there's 2 small remnant salt ponds that will be partially filled by the project, but we are actually preserving a good percentage of those on site. And so there's preservation on site, and then there's this large component of preservation immediately adjacent to the project site.
So maybe I didn't understand this, but it looks like the project area, there's a section west of the site, the pond area, which is part of the project area. That's this 32-acre.
It's not part of the project area. There's immediately west of the project area is a piece of property that's owned by the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. It's known as the Caltrans pond. It was an actual mitigation feature for some Caltrans project some time ago, but immediately west of the project site it's not owned by the applicant. The 32 acres western portion starts further to the west.
Yeah, that's what I mean. That's the section I'm interested in. Why was that not used for wetland creation?
It's already almost 100% wetland already. It's waters of the United States. So salt ponds and the associated fringe wetland community are already waters of the United States. So the only opportunity there would be to restore it to tidal action, and that would result in excessive salts and brines being released into the California Department of Fish and Wildlife's Wildlife Preserve. And so their thoughts were that that would have to be completely off-hauled because they don't want their preserve that they've worked so hard to create to be contaminated by those brines in those salt ponds.
Perfect, thank you. So what is the impact to future sea level rise adaptation for the city by converting this parcel to hardscape? Like,
This site actually isn't subject to tidal action. It's actually quite isolated from any tidal action coming from the bay. There's a very significant levee on the southern boundary of the project that would preclude any waters entering the reserve from actually flooding the project site itself. And the only other water that would have to come over 92 for it to flood this parcel. So
what about the impacts of groundwater rise associated with sea level rise?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Yeah, so we did talk a bit about sea level rise in the CEQA document, but it's one of those things that, George, you want to speak about this, about the impact of the environment on the project versus the project on the environment?
Sure. This is a situation that you sometimes hear referred to as reverse CEQA, and it's where what the purpose of CEQA in the EIR document is to identify significant environmental impacts of the proposed project, and then to mitigate or avoid those impacts to the extent feasible. So what we're looking at is sea level rise is an existing condition that may affect this site. The project itself, we did a GHG analysis. It's below thresholds as far as climate change and that sort of thing. So the sea level rise is expected in the Bay Area is going to happen with or without this project. And so what we're looking at in terms of sea level rise in the CEQA document is, okay, so if the site is flooded from a sea level rise event, what impacts would the project have as a result of that? And mostly what that would entail would there be like a hazardous materials release? A good example would be if this was a wastewater treatment project, sea level rise came in, flooded all the treatment ponds, and you had all this wastewater discharge without any treatment. That's not the case for a project like this. It was really, we took a look at the proposed use is these pods would be stored inside. They're not hazardous materials. Hazardous materials are not kept in them. So you're looking at maybe a few trucks that are stored on site, which is no different than most of the industrial uses around here. And it's just enclosed in the gas container of a diesel truck, that sort of thing. So we didn't really see a significant impact from inundation of the parking lot, for example, or the San Francisco Bay Trail or any of those components, just because there's just no hazardous material that would be released into the open water if it was inundated. But as far as would this project cause sea level rise, no, we looked at it in the GHG sense, which is what ultimately is the driving force behind climate change. And this project is below the significant thresholds for the state to achieve its goals in the future for GHG emissions. So this project does not have a significant impact on GHG and therefore on rising sea level.
So I'm curious about one other thing. So the trucks that are delivering cargo here, I guess it's pods. Are the pods like the size of a small container?
Correct. The pods are 5 by 8 by 7.
Okay, and do the pods, do they come in every day of the week?
Yes.
So I guess this is my question, is that we heard a few months ago from the Amazon distribution center a large concern about van traffic and its impacts on pavement. And those were small vans. And these are larger trucks with containers on them. Why are we not concerned about the impacts to our pavement associated with this use, but we were of the Amazon use?
Our engineering division is not present on this call, so they can't speak to what would have caused a concern about the Amazon project versus this one. But what I can tell you is that based on our engineering division looks at each project and they look at the number of trips associated with each project. And then they determine if a VMT and or LTA, local transportation analysis, is warranted based on the number of trips and the types of trucks that would be associated with it. And the staff that reviews those projects made a determination that an LTA was not necessary for the project as proposed based on the 116,000 square foot warehouse that's going to be here versus the 500+ thousand square foot warehouse associated with the Amazon operations. Could have been a question of scale, could have been a number of trips that were coming in and out. My understanding was that this was going to be a pretty low impact operation in comparison to some of the surrounding industrial uses that occupy surrounding sites. But if you have questions for engineering, we can, I can address them, but it wouldn't be tonight.
No, that's perfect. Thank you. And then the final question I have is there soft soils like Young Bay muds or other compressible materials under the site that's going to require mitigation prior to construction by raising the elevation of the building?
I think there are some geotechnical mitigation measures. George or Renata, do you guys want to talk about that? I know some borings that are going down into the project site.
Yeah, absolutely. This soil needs a lot of attention, and we are working with the ground and soil remediation companies, and our structural engineer and our geotechnical engineer are working to find the right solution. And I believe the geotech report is attached to the EIR and the recommendations as well. Yeah, it's not an easy project by any stretch.
Thank you. I appreciate you listening, you answering my question.
You're welcome.
And just to be clear, those recommendations in the geotechnical report were made mitigation measures and conditions of approval for the project.
Okay, thank you. With no more questions from commissioners, let's see, I don't see any hands or hands raised. Then I'm going to go ahead and invite the public to comment on this item at this time. Please raise your hand if you wish to speak on this item. Ms. Chan.
Thank you, Chair. At this time, we have 3 hands raised. I'm going to call on Kim Huggett. Kim, can you unmute yourself?
Thank you, and good evening. I'm Kim Huggett, President and CEO of the Hayward Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber's Government Relations Council spent a good long time with Mr. Owen in February and reviewed the plans for U-Haul's uniquely designed structure and its generous donation of such a large expanse of land to preserve our shoreline and trail system. There's as noted, there's one structure there going back to the days of salt harvesting of no historic value, and once called by then City Council member Al Mendel as a pile of garbage in the shape of a barn. The government study of the project found less than significant or no impacts on environmental quality. Al, I keep my notes of your meetings. Still, my chamber committee was curious as to why, after years of trying to find someone willing to invest in this property, the city couldn't attract a competitive field of developers. So at its March meeting, We heard from the city's economic development manager, Paul Nguyen, and Leah Schmidt. They explained how the city spent years working with anybody and everybody in the brokerage community to find interest in this property. Paul Nguyen told us, quote, "No one would take this on, and I met with every life sciences company that would take my call," unquote. Even after rezoning to allow tech, e-commerce, and R&D uses, there was little or no interest until U-Haul stepped up, bought the property, and pledged to go through the long and complicated EIR process. And I believe they will be a good corporate citizen here. We've already talked about neighboring businesses that could possibly aid in their operations. And by having U-Haul in the community, it makes it easier to learn about the company's philanthropy that is focused on assisting charitable organizations. And the Chamber has more than 100 that address food, clothing, and shelter. Please take this into consideration during your deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Could you please mute yourself? Thank you. I'm going to call on Kevin Dowling. Please unmute yourself, Kevin.
Hi, this is Kevin Dowling, a former city council member. And the city of Hayward has been struggling for years and years and years to have entryways into the city. How does Hayward differentiate itself from other communities? This U-Haul building will be right on the edge of the San Mateo Bridge. Could the city ask U-Haul to dedicate some land for the city to do that, and maybe even help the city create some kind of entryway to say, you are now entering the city of Hayward, what is our slogan? The heart of the Bay. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to call on Michael Lazo. Please unmute yourself, Michael.
Thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. Mike Lozo on behalf of LiUNA Local 304. Appreciate the acknowledgement of our comments and those of Dr. Smallwood. We still have some concerns, though, that we wanted to highlight in my brief time, and focusing just on the biological concerns that Dr. Smallwood has raised, at least 4 of those. One is one concern that's left unaddressed, we think, is the failure to address the impact to refugia habitat, which is upland habitat for the salt marsh harvest mouse. Right now, the mitigations focus on wetland habitat and one-to-one mitigation, et cetera. But that doesn't address the loss of refugia habitat, which might become important, especially as sea level continues to rise, or bay level in this case. Bird strikes is a large concern. Glass facades in general are bad for birds. Based on his review of bird collision studies, Dr. Smallwood documents the ample science that describes this impact. And he actually calculates from the extent of the windows there that there'd be about 84 bird deaths per year. And this is just not addressed in the draft EIR. It's only a brief response to our comments. And Dr. Smallwood points out the deficiencies in the response to the comments. And it is also shared by the committee to complete the refuge as well. Third would be concern about cumulative impacts to wildlife from vehicle collisions. And again, Dr. Smallwood provides references to numerous studies documenting cumulative impacts of vehicle collisions. And the response simply acknowledges that there's already a lot of traffic and on Highway 92, for example, and hence implicitly a lot of collisions apparently with wildlife from other traffic. But that's not the way to address a project's contribution to the significant impact. It's not the standard for addressing cumulative impacts under CEQA by pointing at the other problems that are out there. And lastly, Dr. Smallwood highlights the noise impacts, which I think the committee also highlighted. And he discusses noise impacts of the project on nearby wildlife. And again, the response effort tries to use Highway 92 impacts as essentially an excuse to downplay potential impacts at the project site. That's just not sufficient under CEQA. And as Dr. Smallwood notes, the project will have its own significant noise impacts on wildlife, which should have been assessed in the EIR, but weren't. So those are the 4 things I'd just like to highlight for you in my 3 minutes, and appreciate the acknowledgement of our comments, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right.
Julie, sorry, just one thing. I just want to, on Kevin Dowling's comment, is definitely something we'd be willing to do as far as.
Yeah, I was going to ask if we wanted to address some of that at this point. I just want to ask really quick, Ms. Jen, are there any other public comments?
No, Chair, that's it.
Okay, yeah, go ahead if somebody would like to address Mr. Dowling's request.
Do we want to close the public comments
thank you.
first?
Yes, thank you for that reminder, Ms. Jen. Yes, I will go ahead and close the public comment section. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and who was going to address the potential question about Mr. Dowling's comments? Did someone speak up about that?
Sorry, yeah, it's me, Jerry.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Jerry.
Definitely open to considering that, between U-Haul and Hayward developing something that'd be real nice for the gateway there, the entryway there. Definitely open for that.
Thank you. Okay, and did staff want to address any of the other comments from Lee? Did you want to address any other comments from the public about the bird strikes, maybe?
Yeah. So George, you want to step in about that one? Because my understanding is that is a significant issue when you're talking about, 50-story buildings. I'm not sure about 50 foot. Do you want to step in, George, and talk about that? And then I can talk about the noise and sort of how we measure that with an industrial building on industrially zoned land. And the fact that this isn't going to have any sort of it's not going to have any generators or any equipment that would typically generate a lot of noise. And a warehouse is not a noise generator in and of itself, based on the existing conditions and background report of the general plan. A warehouse is not going to generate noise. Route 92 would definitely generate a lot of noise. And when you look at those maps, there will be noise that comes out from there. So then you would look at the impact of the noise from the roadway on users of the building. But a warehouse building isn't going to, and this particular one that doesn't have generators or other large scale equipment isn't going to generate a lot of noise. But George, you want to step in about the biological stuff?
Sure. The bird strike issue. I work on a lot of tower projects here in San Jose, and it is an issue, especially projects along waterways. If you have these tall glass towers, and bird strikes do happen on smaller buildings as well. But we replied to that comment in the original comment letter from Dr. Smallman, in that the glass paneling on this building has been broke up as sort of about things that stick out from the building, from the glass, to sort of break up the glass surface and make it apparent that it's not just open space, or that they don't just see the reflection of the water in the glass and think that they can approach it for a landing, because there's these solid opaque objects, architectural features incorporated into the glass to sort of make it apparent that it's not a fly zone for a bird. And as Leah mentioned, the building's only 50 foot tall as well, which sort of factors into it and helps reduce the potential for those bird strikes. Essentially, it mostly we rely on the design of the glass and those architectural features that we've sort of incorporated into the glass. I think as Renata mentioned earlier too, the glass will not be reflective, which should cut down on what can happen a lot of times is a bird may see the reflection of plants, trees, or water bodies in glass and not realize it's a reflection and therefore collide into it. In this case, using reflective glass may help further alleviate the potential for bird strikes.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry, go ahead, Leah.
I don't know if we want to talk about the upland habitat. I think Hope, maybe you had something to say about that. And then there was vehicle collisions along Route 92. Maybe George or I
discuss the Saltmarsh Harvest Mouse upland refugia. I actually have a master's degree in biology, specifically on the Saltmarsh Harvest Mouse. And so I feel qualified to address this comment. Saltmarsh harvest mice are very dedicated to pickleweed habitats, and yes, they do use upland refugia during high tide events. As I mentioned, this site is not subject to high tide events, and actually the upland areas that would be covered by the proposed building are largely unvegetated or have very low cover vegetation. So it provides very marginal or unsuitable upland refugia habitat, because any mouse running across the surface of the project site would be easily preyed upon by aerial predators. So it actually isn't providing a lot of upland refugia habitat. I think it was an excellent comment, because I think the loss of upland refugia is going to be an issue around the Bay Area, and I think we all need to be thinking about that. But in this particular case, the project itself is not going to have a significant reduction in valuable upland refugia habitat next to the preserved pickleweed habitat that is being preserved in perpetuity for the mouse.
Okay, thank you. Was that as far as addressing the public comments? Okay, thank you, everyone. Okay, let's move on to commissioner discussion on the item. I see Commissioner Okenda's hand is up first.
Yeah, just one question about the project of this size. Just curious about any conversations with any of the labor unions in the area for construction. Like to know if there's a PLA or, labor has shown interest in this project at all.
I'll defer to Jerry or Renata on that question.
Renata, I apologize. I might have to defer to you on that question.
I couldn't hear the question. I'm sorry. Would you be so kind to repeat it, please?
Of course. Yeah, I was just curious if labor has, any of the labor unions in Hayward have shown any interest in this project, or you've had any communications with them about project labor agreement or anything of the sort?
No, we have not.
All right. Thank you.
Well, at least I haven't received any communication from any union. Jerry?
I have not either, no.
Okay, thank you. So now their hands are raised for commissioner discussion. Oh, Commissioner Ali Sullivan.
And I know this is just a minor thing that has come up, but in regards to Mr. Dowling's comment, I thoroughly agree. I think it's a great idea to have some type of a bit of signage at the entrance there that would note that welcome to Hayward, something of that sort. Again, tiny piece of this bigger discussion. If that is something, though, that the developer is willing to support, I guess for city staff, the question would be, and perhaps for the city attorney, would we potentially be looking to add that as a condition of approval?
Yes. Yeah, you could consider that.
Okay, perfect. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. Commissioner Mendel.
We're in discussion, yes?
Yes, we're in discussion period. Yeah.
So, so first of all, Mr. Huggett, in all my years on the City Council, no one has ever accurately quoted me back to myself. So that was a first. Thank you for that. I will say, though, that I'm not in favor of this proposal. I think that for a number of reasons. So first of all, this site, along with many others in the industrial area, was rezoned recently to exclude maintenance yards and to make warehouses much easier to establish, to build new ones. And that was because the city very explicitly does not want to attract more warehouses. I mean, the council has been sort of saying that explicitly. That is not our goal. What the city wants to attract is office uses, advanced manufacturing, food manufacturing, biotech, high tech, that sort of thing. I used to work on that street, actually. I don't anymore, but I used to, and I worked for a high tech company, and would walk around, and I'm familiar with the area. And there are a great many technology and biotech companies in that very area, within a quarter mile of that site. there is a amassing of such uses there, which shows that they are viable. The city wants more high-tech, biotech office uses, and they are working in that site. And we have said we don't want more warehouses, and we have zoned this site to make it harder for a warehouse. So the application on its face is sort of running contrary to what the city council has said it wants in this specific location and in our industrial area generally. So it's not quite what we're looking for, right? Now, the Planning Commission is required to make a statement of overriding consideration for this project. In order to vote yes, we have to basically say, this is, so overridingly good, for whatever reason we deem, viable, that it outweighs the, some of the negatives and the unmitigatable environmental impacts. Now, if this were an office use, I think we could make that finding. If this were a high-tech use, we could make that finding. If this were a biotech company, we could make that finding because it's so aligned with our other goals in terms of jobs, job creation, that sort of thing. But a regional warehouse for, storage bins that doesn't even serve the Hayward area, as the applicant pointed out. This is a regional warehouse. There's not going to be, pods being directly delivered to Hayward residents. So it's not like some convenience that we're adding here. Combined with the fact that there's only 25 jobs, warehouse jobs, we've all been paying attention to the news around Amazon's warehouse jobs. They aren't exactly the high-tech jobs the city has said we want to attract and could possibly form the basis for a statement of overriding consideration. Warehouse jobs do not fit that. And this is a gateway site. This and the Gillig site are our opportunity, Hayward's opportunity, to signal to the rest of the Bay Area the kinds of uses we want. We explicitly don't want warehouses. Why on earth would we think it's, there's some sort of statement of overriding consideration to put a warehouse as the very first building that everyone will see when they drive into Hayward over that bridge? It runs, not only does it not, further our goals, it runs in contradiction to our goals. So there's absolutely no way that I could make a statement of overriding consideration and thus cannot vote for the project. And I urge my colleagues to join me in not supporting this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Stevens.
Thank you. So similar to Commissioner Mendel, I have a very similar feeling with this project. I think the first thing that sort of bothers me by this, when I look at the biological impact, I see that we're taking out sections of salt marsh. And while I respect the biologist's opinion about this, I know in many communities throughout the Bay Area, the minute you touch a salt marsh, that's a non-starter. And I can't believe that we're here tonight actually looking at this. And I think that the mitigations that were offered, even though that they might be consistent with state and U.S. core policies, I just don't agree with this. Also, I think a gateway has many meanings, and I've heard two statements here. One, it's the type of building and the type of use, and I agree with Commissioner Mendel related to that. But the one that really bothers me is that placing a sign here and conditioning the developer with doing that, I am totally opposed to that, because the development of gateway signage for a community on an entrance as important as Highway 92 should be a community-driven event. So I'm completely against that. I think fundamentally too, we're proposing to build on the bayfront. And the bayfront, the buffer of the bayfront is an important for not only ecological reasons, but also to attenuate future sea level rise. And I just haven't seen a sufficient analysis in this document that makes me satisfied that this will protect Hayward's future. And finally, I'm really, really bothered by the approach that was taken with our friends at Amazon and the truck impacts associated with that. And no really analysis done related to this, when I would assume that the trucks used by this applicant would provide more axle load and potentially more damage on the pavement. So I am not in support of this project.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Goldstein.
Yeah, thank you. Commissioners Mendel and Stevens make some compelling arguments, both about the gateway approach and also the use there. However, and I definitely concur with Commissioner Stevens. I think the whatever gets designed there and erected as some kind of a gateway memorial really needs to have more community input to it. And that, to me, sounds like something that probably ought to go back to City Council or, some other, whoever else we normally get involved to discuss those things. And I'm not as burned up about the idea of having U-Haul there. I definitely agree with Commissioner Mendel that, it'd be great to have some other notable business. Not that U-Haul isn't notable. You guys are great. I admire and respect how you do your business and have no doubts that it'll be an attractive building. I like the designs. I'm actually in favor of approving the project because I see that the 32 or 36 acres, whatever that parcel that'll be preserved, I think that actually is a huge benefit. Even though we are giving up those 6 acres, I think some development's going to occur on those other 6 or 7 acres anyway, eventually. So I see the preservation of the other as being a great reason to approve the project. So for those reasons, I will be approving it.
Thank you. Let's see, are there any other comments from commissioners at this point? Commissioner Okenda.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump back in here. I had just asked the question and I had, always feeling like a blessing to hear some of my other commissioners' thoughts and opinions on different projects. I had some concerns, just a little questioning about why unions hadn't been sort of engaged in this conversation or about this project. That was it seems like a big project. It seems like there might be interest there. I personally didn't ask any of the union membership or leadership, about their involvement. So that's just something that I think is a pause button for me on a project like this. I do tend to agree with Commissioner Mendel's aspirational comments about sort of this as a gateway, and I absolutely respect his opinion in a lot of these issues for development, as he's worked on these things for a long time. So taking that kind of into consideration, I think I'll say, Commissioner, you've swayed me on this point, and I do think I'd be voting against the project, but it's also to do with what Commissioner Stevens said. And while we were reviewing the presentation, I did look at the shoreline master plan and the ArcGIS sort of mapping for sea level rise on this area. And the 16-inch high tide doesn't necessarily affect this area, but the 16-inch 100-year floodplain absolutely does. And then the 55-inch tide does cover this entire parcel. So, I think there's just some considerations about like long-term planning on that front, and also my obvious pessimism about our ability to address the climate crisis in front of us. But I think for all those reasons that I am inclined to vote against the project as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I went into this, really interested in hearing my colleagues this evening because I was a little bit on the fence. I mean, looking at sort of the discussion of alternatives in the EIR and what the sort of pros and cons were, I saw the benefit of having this 32 acres preserved in perpetuity and the ability to have this dilapidated building be torn down. So we're not looking at that every time we come across 92. But I also, when I went to look at this site, I also thought, man, why are we building out any further when we really need to address the sea level rise? And so, like Commissioner Stevenson's comments, I agree with too. To be building out further into the bay when we're talking about what we're going to do to shore up our coastline, it seems to be sort of working in opposite directions for me. I would like to see something really great there as a gateway. I didn't have a huge problem with the building necessarily. I appreciate Commissioner Mendel's comments about the warehouse and our desire to potentially see something more like high-tech company there. So I asked the question, about a conservation group potentially taking on the property. I mean, I would like to see us take a little bit more time to see what we can do to potentially preserve more of that site or build in a different way there. So while I'm on the fence, I find myself not wanting to support this project this evening. And I, with all respect to you, Hall, and all the good work you've done and what you've tried to accommodate to make this a really good project, both environmentally and, for development of Hayward. I'm coming, on balance, I'm coming down on the side of not supporting this project this evening. So those are my comments. Thank you. Let's see, anyone else? Did you, I still see two hands up. I think at this point, since there's no further discussion, I will entertain a motion at this point. Commissioner Mendel, Commissioner Kennedy, you both have your hands up. Did one of you want to make a motion?
No, sorry, I just do that.
Okay, do I have a motion on the table then to move this forward? Commissioner Stevens. You're muted, Commissioner Stevens.
Sorry about that. I'll make a motion to deny PH 21-059.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table to deny the project, made by Commissioner Stevens, seconded by Commissioner Mendel. Do we have commissioner discussion on the motion? No. Okay, Ms. Chan, please call a roll call vote.
Thank you. Commissioner Ali Sullivan.
Support the motion to deny. I assume that's an aye, but just wanted to make sure there's very clear what the aye meant.
Support the motion to deny. Commissioner Goldstein.
I vote no.
Commissioner Mendel.
I vote yes on the motion to deny.
Commissioner Okenda.
I vote yes as well.
Commissioner Stevens.
Yes.
Commissioner Roche.
Yes.
So I just want to make sure I have 5 ayes to support the motion to deny and 1 no by Commissioner Goldstein, correct?
That's right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Chan. And with that, the motion to deny the project passes with a vote of 5-1. And I thank everyone for this long discussion this evening. And Mr. Owen, thank you for your time, and staff. Thank you, everyone. Okay, so with that, let us move on to our next item, which is approval of the minutes for the June 10th, 2021 meeting.
Motion to approve them.
Sorry.
Second.
Commissioner Kenda, seconded by Commissioner Stevens. Okay. Did you get that, Ms. Chan?
Yes, that was Okenda and Stevens.
Yes.
We're doing the minutes of June 10th, correct?
Right. Yes.
All right. Commissioner Ali Sullivan.
Aye.
Commissioner Goldstein.
Aye.
Commissioner Mendel.
Yes.
Commissioner Okenda.
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens.
Yes.
Chair Roche.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. And the minutes for the approval, the motion for the approval of the minutes for the June 10th meeting passes with a vote of 6-0. Thank you. Next, do we have a motion to approve the minutes of the June 24th, 2021 meeting?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you. So Commissioner Stevens makes a motion to pass the minutes, and I saw Commissioner Alice Sullivan, you had your hand up to second. Thank you. Okay, Ms. Chan.
Stevens and Ali Sullivan, correct?
Yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Ali Sullivan,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldstein,
Yes.
Commissioner Mendel,
Yes.
Commissioner Okenda.
Yes.
Was that a yes?
Oh, yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Stevens.
Yes.
Thank you. Chair Roche.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. And the motion to approve the June 24th meeting minutes passes with a vote of 6-0. Thank you. And let us move on to commission reports, oral report on planning and zoning matters. Leah, do you have anything tonight?
No, just that on the next meeting, we're going to have a report from the Public Works Department on impact fees related to transportation, and then a couple of other items. The transportation impact fee will be a work session, and then you'll have two other items so far on that agenda.
Okay, thank you. Okay, commissioner announcements. I see Commissioner Goldstein, you put your hand up.
No, sorry.
Oh, no, you didn't have anything, Commissioner Stevens? Okay, Commissioner Stevens.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So the Alameda County Department of Public Works is working on a plan to design and construct a trail that links Niles to Stanola. So that's pretty close to us. And they have a scoping meeting for their environmental impact report that occurs next Thursday night from 6 to 8 p.m. And you can get all the information on the project by going to nilescanyontrail.org. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Stevens. Anyone else? No, okay. I think that is it. And the next meeting will be July 22nd, 2021 at 7 p.m. And I think that's it. No other comments? Then I'm going to go ahead and adjourn the meeting at 9:31 p.m. Thank you, everyone, for the great discussion.
Thanks, everyone. I appreciate you.
Thank you.